everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Danielle. I'm a writer and reader of a student, and today we are going to be talking about the reader part. You know when you pick up a classic and it feels incredibly overwhelming with just how old and ancient the text feels? I've done that, and sometimes modern English can feel like old English at this point. However, throughout my years, my very long years of being an English major, I have figured out some ways on how to read classics for leisure, actually. And we will be talking about that. I think that the thing with classics is that people forget that classics were written to be elitist or mysterious. At least most of them weren't. They were written for the everyman. And the reason why they are so popular is because they were written for their modern audience. And we just need to learn how to bridge the gap, people who lived back then and people who live today. But here's the thing, classics weren't written for elitism or classism. For the most part, they weren't written to be hard to understand. They were written for the everyman. They were written for normal and regular readers just like you and me. And that's what makes them so popular, is that they appeal to a wide range of audiences. We just need to learn how to bridge the gap between our world and theirs. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, my girlfriend is in the background. You have a guess. So there is something timeless about classics. However, we will be learning how to slow down and actually enjoy them. So first step is to figure out your why. Now, classics don't have to be intimidating. However, I will admit they certainly can be. So I encourage you to think about, honestly, why you want to read the classics. And I feel like for the most part, people are curious about what all the fuss is about, like what makes this book so popular, what has made it last a test of time. Maybe you're reading it just to say that you read it and to seem smart about it. And trust me, I have been there. But even if you are only reading it for the plot, and not for the deeper meaning or deeper themes of the book, I don't think that's a bad thing. Because ultimately, these books weren't written for them. That's a minority of people that are going to be reading for the plot. The minority of people are going to be reading it for the themes. Meanwhile, the majority of people are going to be reading it for the plot and the characters. You still get something, ultimately, you'll still get something valuable out of your reading experience. Literature works on multiple levels. There's surface level, where you have above the iceberg, where it's pretty much just the plot and the characters and what happened. Meanwhile, you have everything below the iceberg, which is the deeper themes, the historical context that makes the book relevant to the modern audience. But I don't think that reading on the surface level means that you're reading it wrong. You're just reading it differently. Like an example would be like Percy Jackson, where kids are reading these books not to understand the deeper meanings of the themes, or they don't have the context of reading the metamorphoses in the background. For the most part, they're reading these books for fun. They're reading these books for the plot, for the fun characters, and ultimately they do get the themes of bravery, heroism, friendship, found family out of it. However, that's not their main focus going into the book. So ultimately, they are taking something away from the book, but that's not their motive going into it. And I think that's the same thing with a lot of classics. Like, you can go into, say, Frankenstein wanting to learn more about the creature, but you will pull away with the themes of what makes something a human, even if you don't expressly read the book or start the book with that intention. Part 2 is going to be to start simple, Don't start off with Journey to the West or the Mahabharata. That's ridiculous. I have yet to read those books, to be frank, but try something small. And this video is not going to be about how to read these books academically. I could do another video on that, because reading a book academically versus for leisure is a completely different experience. If you want to see that video, let me know. But right now we're focusing on the surface level of the content. And understanding what's on the surface level is necessary to understand what is beneath the surface. Like I said, think of it like an iceberg. You have to know what's on top before you figure out what's at the bottom. So step 3, I think it's necessary if you are reading a book, these classics for leisure, is to realize that they are steeped in elitism, the culture surrounding the books, but I don't think that should stop you. A lot of people are scared of classic literature because of the elitism, the gatekeeping, the racism in the literary canon, all of the isms surrounding it. And while the literary canon is not free of criticism, I will never say that. The literary canon is white and male and able-bodied. That's very obvious. But today we are reclaiming it for everyone. And I will reiterate that because these works were written for the everyman, that's what makes these books so profound, and what has made it last the test of time is that people can read it from all sorts of levels of life. I think that no one is too dumb or like not smart enough to read a classic. I think you just have to meet the book halfway. Part 4 is to realize that it's okay to feel lost. I still get lost when I read classic literature. Right now, I am reading the Metamorphoses by Ovid. And while I do have, Ovid is writing with the assumption that you have read the Iliad, the Aeneid, and the Odyssey, and a whole bunch of other epics behind you, and that you have a whole bunch of other epics in your wheelhouse. I have read 3 of those epics that I just mentioned, but even then, I am still confused, and I'm asking my professor for historical context of their modern time. Yeah, I think people forget that a lot of these works assume that their audience already knows what is in the modern zeitgeist of the time, and you're not supposed to be perfect at it. You're not, because you won't be perfect at it. And it's going to take some time for you to understand the historical context in order for everything to make sense, but you have to fail before you learn. Step 5 is to pick a book that you actually want to read. Now, this is obvious, however, I would encourage you not to pick a book just because it sounds impressive, but to pick something that you are actually interested in. A lot of these impressive classics are really hard to read, like Journey to the West or Mahabharata, like I previously mentioned. I encourage you to pick something that actually interests you. Like, I really love vampires, therefore I've read Carmilla. If you're a romantic, try Pride and Prejudice. If you want to laugh, try The Importance of Being Earnest. When you start with something that you're excited about, you're more likely to finish it and you're more likely to enjoy it. Plus, it's always fun to recognize the origins of themes or type scenes or type characters that you fell in love with in your modern literature that was prevalent back in the day. Step 6, if it helps, take notes. You don't have to take notes by any means, but it can really help if you're struggling to understand and comprehend the text. After each chapter, when I'm reading a pretty dense classic or if it's for school, I will oftentimes jot down what just happened in the chapter in bullet points. That helps me remember what I just read and helps me comprehend it, and then the next time I open the book, I can skim that and remember what I read the night before. Step 7, understand the context but don't get stuck there. A little of a background goes a long way. Knowing Regency era etiquette and makes Pride and Prejudice a hell of a lot more interesting. Like the infamous hand flex scene where Mr. Darcy flexes his hand after he touches Elizabeth's hand. That's scandalous. But you won't know that unless you know that touching a person of the opposite gender's hand in the Regency era politics is completely scandalous and it's a big no-no. If I am reading classic for fun, I will oftentimes Wikipedia the book. Obviously not 100% reliable, but we're not looking to write a paper, we're looking to get some background info. And it'll usually tell me the year it was published, where it was published, and then some major historical events surrounding the book that contributed to the author starting to write it. This is all helpful in understanding the setting in which the book was published. But I will say don't fall into the trap of over-researching to the point where you don't even open the book, because at that point, what is the point? You have to, as you read the book, you'll pick things up as you go. Step 8 is to embrace the weird language. English is alive and well, and classics are a record of how people spoke back in the time. And yes, they did speak a little bit more fancier, a little bit more harder to read. However, I will raise you, the slang nowadays, I do not understand. And I think that people 100 years in the future will be looking at 6, 7 and be very confused, because I am currently so very confused about it. Sure, some prose is long and flowery and unnecessary, but I think that's what makes them fascinating. I encourage you to let the language just wash over you, and you'll hopefully get used to it. When I was stuck, when I was first starting to learn how to read classics, I would read the audiobook alongside the physical version of the book. The narrator's tone and rhythm of the text really helps me understand the context and comprehension of the text that I was reading. Step 9 is to give yourself some grace. Now, classics are known to be easy texts of literature to read, and they take patience, they do, but I think that it is well worth it. It's not about reading fast, it's about enjoying it. Celebrate the effort. Every page is a milestone. So at the end of the day, reading classics isn't about proving how smart you are or checking off some lists. It's about connection with stories that were told in the past and that connect us to the future. And I think these stories speak volumes to the fact that they have survived centuries, with people who experienced the world vastly in vastly different circumstances, but there is something still powerful that they connect to us 200, 400 years later. So you're not supposed to understand everything. You're supposed to get confused. You're supposed to Google weird references. That is all a part of the process. And maybe laugh at how dramatic everything is, but that's part of the fun. That's part of the experience. Because I think that the more you read, the more you realize that these old books, they'll have something to say to us. And hundreds of years later, that is still kind of magical that they can still speak to us today. If you're wondering what classic you should start off with, I did make a video. I posted it last week. I will put it somewhere on the screen for you to click on. I posted a video recommending some of my favorite classics that I read in school, that I read for leisure, that I really recommend. And if you do want to see a part 2 of a video on how to read academically, let me know. I'm more than happy to do that video. I just need to know if you'd be interested in that. But yeah, let me know in the comments. And until then, happy reading.